The problem is, you see, just at that point, you realise you've forgotten something. So it won't take me long. And the reason it's important, it's a crib sheet that comes later. I was going to start tonight with what I thought was a bit of a joke, you see, because I was going to say that following my success with the laburnum tree that I cut down and brought to the club, and everybody got all of the bits and pieces and made things, and that was wonderful. I've had another delivery. Oh, sorry, number 4, please. Camera 4, please. Camera 4, please. You've got to stay with me tonight, Martin. There'll be a lot of this. No. So I've had another delivery. So anybody wants a bit of ash, come and see me, because my back garden is full. Now, that was going to be the joke. But if this works, that's not so much of a joke, because it was all cut down from, I don't know what you describe it as. I think it's a sort of plantation that must have been put in 60 years ago. It was all ash in the middle with beech around the outside. And that's what it looks like. Well, that's a couple of months ago now. It's starting to grow up green. We spoke to the land agent, who seemed to have something to do with it. And it was all going off to Pocklington to be chopped up into logs. It looks like very good ash to me, but whether ash suffered from dieback, which is the reason they say they've chopped it down, is any good for turning? I don't know. Does anybody know if you can turn ash dieback? You can. So they either cut it down because it was a crop planted years and years and years ago, and it's gone off for firewood, or not. So that was going to be the joke, but never mind. I've got another. No, I've got another one. No, camera 4, please. I'm going to do some drilling tonight. Yeah. I'll tell you what the problem is. I can see the writing, you can't. I wish I'd worked that out earlier. All right, underneath, you can see the name of it. Underneath it says, "No, this is Mitch. You were right. I found my drill." Should have checked the pictures. Okay, I was just going to touch on my early turning, because where have I gone? I did all of the usual sorts of things. My very first thing that I turned, I think, was a 3 or 4-legged stool that somebody challenged me to turn. Christine challenged me to turn it. It's fair enough, because the little lathe that I bring along on the hands-free nights is the lathe that she gave me to do this with, and I've still got that lathe and I still use it. It's a great little lathe, and it'll be pen turning. I've checked pen turning in a month's time. But I did all sorts of bits and pieces. I did the usual bowls, which were far too big and heavy, and I started to get the shapes right. I turned things that could be used or sold at sales. I have to admit, I haven't done so much of that recently. We are still on there, aren't we? I did have a session with the great Sue Harte, and after a day with Sue Harte, I managed to turn some of her inside-out candlesticks. I don't know how many pairs I did turn eventually, but there are several pairs around the country. And of course, you get to a point where you're turning things too fast. So I went to open segment turning, which slows you down considerably because you have to wait for the glue to go. Nothing as grand as Martin's segmented turning, this big. But that's where I went to. And the only other thing that I usually talk about is another stool. Now, that's not me. I didn't turn that. That's a stool that one of Christine's class was refurbishing, and it was just waiting to be caned. And I got hold of it on the same little lathe, and for Christmas turned that Abazat copy. So
that was a stool sample.
Stool sample, yeah. Thank you. And that's the stool that I turned, so you can see all the parts. And that was done. The actual stretchers on the front there are about as long as that little lathe can take. And that's what I got into. the last few years, I haven't done that much of that type of turning. I've gone sort of in a different direction, which was the reason for starting talking about this way. And because of my wife's interest, and she's just walked out the door, so she's obviously not interested in what I'm saying. Oh, she's closing the door. That's a good idea. So, being a member of the wheel tappers and shunters is what I call it at home, but it's the weavers, spinners, and dyers. They meet all around the country. Not the York one, they meet in York, but that makes sense. And a lot of the people there have had lots of things turned by me now. And that's how I got into turning things, which includes work on the spinning wheels. Spinning wheels are a good combination of wood turning and a little bit of metalwork turning. And some people may know I said I've gone over to the dark side because I've got a metalwork turning metalwork lathe. You might see pictures later if I get that far through this. The things start with things like this, niddy noddies. The ends are made just tight and you use it like that, and you wrap your yarn around it. It's for creating a skein of yarn, and they come in 3 sizes. Very cheap. Before that, obviously, from the wood turning side, this is the very first one of these I made. It's the one my wife uses. I pinched it out of a sewing bag. A bowl for wool when you're knitting. The mistake there was to let all of the ladies at the club see it, and I think I got orders for about 20. Making one is fun. Making 2 means you can get the second one right. Making another 18. Well, it is a bit like that because this was sawn out. But what I did after that is I locked it in a chuck and I started to route that out. And there's still a lot of sanding to do afterwards. So other things, just bits and pieces, bobbins. The talks I said was going to be about bobbins. We'll get there. These are for tapestry. There's another device there. I always thought it was a marline spike. What do you use for when you're splicing rope? It's not, it's for winding a ball of wool on. And you can take it off, and you can take the yarn out of the middle or out of the outside. And she uses this one all the time, except tonight. Right, thank you. Yes. Marlin spike. Any guesses? I'll tell you what, I'll give it away. No guesses. It all goes wrong. This is only metric. This is imperial. So it's for measuring the number of wraps you get from a piece of thread or yarn. It's actually 1 inch and it's a 1/2 inch. If you're using really fine stuff, it's better to do it on the 1/2 inch. You don't have to wrap it as many times. You just have to know how to multiply by 2. And here we go again. You'll find nothing when you want it. I will want it later. So yeah, a measuring device. So that was it. The only thing I brought that's nothing to do with this is this. See, I was always very proud of this. Like, I don't think it got that much publicity, but the good Dick Veitch, was it? Yeah. Dick Veitch, New Zealand, made this Saturn box. Well, he didn't make this one, I made this one. But in an evening, he turned this. And we've done off-center turning. So part of this is done off-center to get the actual Saturn ring. But then you have to mount it a second time and turn the ball. It's very clever. And it's quite a number of the things I've seen demonstrated here, I've gone home and had a go at. I wouldn't bring them all here to show you, but that one was successful and I was quite pleased with it. So it never won any prizes because I think people missed it. No, just the judges. No. Okay. Crib sheet. Bobbins. Just very quickly, I will turn some blood. Dick Veitch, I had that in case he was here in July 2017. He happened to be, I think he was the first demonstrator here when we moved up from down the road. The reason I think that is because we had my projector, first time ever, and a couple of cameras using iPhones as cameras for him, one in front and one overhead. It's on the website. That's what I went and had a look. So that's the connection with that. There's a slight other connection. He's from New Zealand, and John knows all about New Zealand woods. And a lot of spinning wheels are made in New Zealand. Ashford is one of the main ones. Major Craft. Major Craft use Rimu wood. And all the ladies think they're wonderful. They're actually a really nice piece of furniture, beautifully finished. But the minute you catch them on something, they mark very easily. I don't know what the finish is on them, but they're very expensive. Ashford's the other one. The one we haven't got Ashford tonight. That's a Louet, which is not New Zealand, is it? No. So that's that. Bobbins, there's a selection of bobbins here. Bobbins. Why are they important? What did they do? Well, they had stuff wrapped around them. That's fine. If you go to a place called Stock Park, I will talk about Stock Park. They today make bobbins just for people like us who want to go and see them make bobbins. It's national English heritage, not national English heritage. Well worth a visit, and you can see them making the bobbins. What was important about bobbins? They were used in a way you might forget, but really in the Industrial Revolution and the expansion of industry in this country, which was driven by cotton and wool and all that sort of thing. The bobbins made in Cumbria, around Windermere and that area, which is where Stock Park is, went all around the country, but mostly to cotton mills in Lancashire. Why did that happen there? Well, they had a lot of water coming down the hills, which could drive the actual water wheels, so it was all water power to start with. And they also had a lot of trees. And you need trees to get these. They used ash, alder, birch, and willow. It was all coppiced, so it was left to grow as long thing, well, thick enough to do that. And they used to get the poles from the woods and leave them for about a year to dry out a bit. The one I was majoring on, Stock Park, it's the only one left. There were something like 60 mills active. At one time, they peaked at 100 or so, but there were 60 mills active most of the time. And Stock Park, the one you can go and see, the only one left, was built in 1835. By 1971, the market had just about dried up completely. Why did it dry up? Wood wasn't the best material for the machines as they got faster and faster and faster. The person that can probably talk about that is John. My wife is sitting with one of the wheels. John is sitting with his 2 wheels or 3 wheels. John's whole career was in the mills of, was it Lancashire? Bradford, mills of Bradford. So his whole life he spent in the mills. He's now a major player in the weavers, spinners and dyers. Yeah, the Department of Environment kept it going, and then English Heritage took it over in '84. Camera 4, please. This will be good if you get sound. Didn't get sound. Okay, this is a stop park. There's no sound. Should have tried that. Can you turn the number 3 up? No. It says it's sending it. Well, I can't talk over all of that because I don't know what it's all about. But if you go to Stock Park, it's still driven by all the line shafts overhead. All right, it's an electric motor that's driving it. You'll see them get bobbins. They might give you one to walk away with, or they'll certainly sell you one. And they look like that. So it's a complete mill that's still there, still working. And you can see it making bobbins not today. They used to make bobbins by the millions. Part of the process, they start by blocking. So that machine is actually just cutting blocks out, which will give you small rounds. They then drill on this. There's no drills on that machine, by the way. Those two things coming out will have drills in normally. So they, don't we all? And they then move on to other machines, so still drilling the holes without a drill. And they move on to another machine, which is small bobbins. It's better with the actual sound that comes with it. I need the sound for the rest of it. So they then go on to this special lathe with special cutter, zoom, 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 and is produced a blank. Yeah, as quick as that from the, it's the first part. There's a second part to that where you cut the slopes and finish it off. But it's just 2 movements. And when it was in full production, the workers could turn out something like 2,500 of these things in a day each. And they were on piecework. And they were paid by the gross of bobbins in a basket. And they made every type of bobbin you can think of. I think because I haven't got the sound, I might just cut that short now, if I knew how to stop it. Right. So we'll go back to that. As a bit of fun, I will turn some wood. One of the ubiquitous bobbins in my lifetime looks like that. They made them at Stockport. From the age of almost nothing, these are all around our house. Mum and Grandma made everything. We were surrounded by Silco bobbins. Because we were children, I don't know where to go with this. You don't have to follow me. Don't have to follow me.
Well, that brings back memories.
I thought it would bring back memories from some people, you see. So, you forgot it. You can find those on YouTube, on the internet. They
Can you get the cardboard board with the tank body to go on to?
well, they call them tank bobbins. Who's got grandchildren? Everybody got grandchildren?
I used to make them myself.
Grandchildren young enough to be grandchildren young enough to be interested. Is that my sound? Okay. Find 3 more people with grandchildren. I made 4. Although those don't have the cutouts on. I think that's about all I was going to do until I've done some real work for you. My interest in bobbins are bobbins of this type, or this type. I made both of these. This one is a Louet bobbin, and it fits without that bit. It fits the little wheel that my wife is working on. Now, the only thing different about this, I haven't put any glue on yet. It's a plastic center with a little hole for you tying things in. And the trick is, if you can, is to make all the bits tight enough. Then put some glue on. One of the ladies said, "Can you make me some bobbins?" And when it turned up, it was on a brass spindle, so it has to be a brass spindle. and that's made to fit. And there's some very small grooves on the end there to help the glue stick when I actually stick it. The reason I've left them is they can be made to whatever size they need to be next time. Rather, it is usual to make 3, if not more. Why 3? When you first turn the first threads, you fill a bobbin. So then you put another bobbin on, and then you fill that bobbin. And those 2 full bobbins are then plied together to make your actual thread that you're going to use eventually. So the ply is a double threads. I wouldn't call it double knitting or anything because I don't understand that. But so you need the 3rd bobbin to actually ply onto before you can get back to turning some more, spinning some more, not turning some more, spinning some more. Okay. I have a liking for 2 chucks. This one and this one. They're both the same. Why have I got 2? Because I can use different jaws. And I can do nearly all the turning I do these days on these 2 chucks without changing any of the jaws. I can start with this one if I'm being really clever and try and put that in there, and it doesn't. But if you can get one of these, if you haven't seen them, it's actually a Morse taper. So on the big chuck jaws, I can hold them dead center. The piece of marking out I have done is on, it's a piece of beech, and we'll produce the end pieces. Obviously off that, if you can get a very thin parting blade, you can get 4 or 5 out of that piece if you're trying really hard. They're about 10 mils thick. For the ends, they're turned bowl style, if you know what I mean. That's grain running that way. That's what I call bowl style, cross grain. So we would do that if we had. Yeah. There is another slight aside there, actually. Choose this one. Anybody remember the chess set demo? Yeah. Anybody remember the trouble I got into? You remember the trouble I got into? You never saw any drilling because I couldn't get things apart. My center, which on my lathe at home is a 1 Morse taper. This is a 2 Morse taper. So to use it on here, I used a sleeve. Anybody remember the trouble I had? I never got it apart on the night because the Morse taper should have a tang that you can get at there. The tang should be operated by a suitable tang removal tool. That should go in there and it should hammer that down. It doesn't. So you're really, really stuck. So in a fit of hoping to be clever about these things, I made 2 wedges because now I can do metalwork. And the 2 wedges come in from opposite sides and then probably not on your lathe bed. Well, I was going to lay it on something and hit it with a hammer, but actually the 2 wedges push together and the sleeve comes off. I'm not using that tonight because I suddenly realized that on my metalworking lathe, I've got one of these anyway that fits this lathe. So that's good. Right. Let's make some noise. Usually at home, I would probably cut the corners off, but I didn't cut the corners off, right? Because you all like to see shavings going everywhere, don't you? So low enough. Oh, now, I said to myself, I'm going to make several mistakes tonight. They're on purpose because you've got to spot when I'm making them. So if I go back here and come back to the lathe with this, what are you going to say me? Tell me.
Right.
Grain direction was wrong. Don't use that on a bowl blank because the grain will catch it. Probably whip it out in your hands and it'll be across the other side of the room. So it's a bowl gouge, and at home I'd probably go, I know with that, try 1,000. How are we doing for time? How do you make this go faster? Never understood this line. We'll go to about 1,000. Can you hear me out there? Are you still awake? I don't feel fast enough to me. Yeah. Usually what happens with this step center. Yeah, I'm being too rough with it. I should have cut the corners off. Doesn't want it. So what am I doing wrong? Yeah. Well, I have now. One thing, if you're using this chuck and these jaws, and you've put that holder in there for that, you know exactly what size you want to make your spigot. So I want a spigot. Don't move it. I remember that somebody said at a demonstration, don't move it. So my starting point with this, once I get the corners off, it'll fly further when it goes. I need, if anybody's listening, I need a new stem center that's got sharper points in it. Well, I'm now into the round for that, which is sort of a good thing. Okay. I don't know whether you need to do this. I always just give it, just put it back slightly and probably take that off again. The aim being to get it on the chuck really, because the stem center is not a very positive drive on it. So it's about 60, I think, millimeters. So if I get it on there, there's a lot more to fly then, I can go further. So that lines up, that's nice, just to hold that in place. So all the problem I was having with this, don't move this with it. I heard it somewhere. Well, and I don't have the problem with the dead center slipping. I've often sat over there and thought it sounds terrible when people are doing that.
Brilliant.
Did you get some overhead shots? Good. Am I holding the tool correctly? Okay. There's all sorts of things you could do with that now. One of the more common things, probably, just lift that up a bit, is to just right. So it needed to be in there because they have very flat sides. The sides, that's a bit high. I wouldn't normally take that off, but because the step center had slipped so much, it had left a ring in the number there. Flatten the end. The middle almost doesn't matter, but I'm going to put that little pit back for later. And if I've got that right, it doesn't really matter. Anything with a straight edge. A slight dent in the middle, but I'm not going to bother about that. If I'm doing a 10 mil, one of those, I could, if I had a pencil. Then, of course, if I had the ruler that I had earlier, which I put down there, I could measure 10 mil from the end. So it's about there. So all we're actually going to produce is a disc. But before we do that, we have to do something that makes it usable. So what I really want to do in techniques tonight is talk a bit about drilling holes. This first one I'm going to drill is going to be 16 millimeter because that's the size, not of either of those. This one here, I think. It's the usual size I use for the holes in the end here. Since I got into metalwork a bit, I've started using something called a center drill to get the hole started. If you're into metalwork, you'll know what that is. If you're not, they look like this. You probably do know, don't you, sir? The whole thing about starting drilling
Is that going round?
is to get a good start. So I'm slowing it down because when I get to 16 mil, I'm only going to want it going at a few hundred. Now, whilst I put that pip in there with the tool, just to remark where the center was, that's lined up almost perfectly with the center. If you go for the overhead, is that the overhead? No. Overhead? No, it nearly shows. And it goes in very nicely because it's a very small drill bit. But the point about it is it's stiff. Your jobber drills, which we all use all the time, are not terribly stiff. The way they're made, they're fairly hardened at the end and they're a bit softer further back. They need to be softer where they're held in the chuck for the chuck to be able to hold them, because if you try holding something that's really hardened in a chuck, it's difficult to get it to go. But these things are hard and stiff. So there's no movement when I do that on that little end there. And I don't need to go any further, but that gives me a hole that my next size drill could actually start on. That's very accurate, accurately drilled. I was nearly said on center. We're not on center necessarily yet. So we change that. And for these, the accuracy, it's not very good. There's more accuracy later when I get to the other bit of drilling. So the hole I want in there is 16. So it's now a jobber drill, and I'm going to slow it down just a little bit more. I don't like to be too fast with a drill that size. It says it's doing about 700 now. It sounds and feels awfully slow to me. Yeah. Something to watch for when you're using, especially drills this size, I found. I'm going to line it up so that the flutes are on both sides. If you take a big drill and you look down the end of it, if this bit here wasn't there, you would see that there's very little metal in the middle. Can we do that on there? Are you on there? Yeah. So actually, there's not as much strength in this thing you think is really solid as you might imagine. Well, this side probably is. But when you get smaller, they can be a bit bendy. The other thing is how well they are sharpened. They've been ground on the end. One of the ones out of this set, the cheap stall at Harrogate, one that I used would just not cut at all. It had not been ground. In fact, this bit was higher than the actual cutting edge. So I had to regrind one of them to make it work. This one's out of the same set. It has been used quite a lot. So if you watch the flutes, if it's ground almost correctly, you should see a similar amount of swarf coming out of both sides. If you've got more swarf coming out of one side of the flute and nothing out of the other, the chances are your drill isn't ground correctly at the end. If it's not ground correctly, you've not got as much chance of it drilling straight and correctly. So this one's actually, I set it up with them the same way, but of course there's a twist in them. So it's coming out here all right, and it's coming out that side. So it's not doing too bad. Of course, you should clear this bit. How far in have I gone? That'll do. So there's more of that later. Right? That's enough for now. So there's my piece. What I tend to do now is put my center back in there. This may or may not be necessary. I tend to slacken that off. Shouldn't do that. But what I now do is center the whole thing on this end and hope that just tightening that down keeps that center. So what I've now got is my piece of wood. And if I cut the outside now, it should be concentric with the hole in the middle, because we're turning relative to this rather than that. It could be slightly out.
He's only making.
It's not as obvious on a piece this size, but if you get a longer piece, it is more obvious. Because I was so vicious before, I've got a nasty piece to get away with. So here we go. How do you get it to go fast quicker? How do you get it to go fast quicker? No, I don't know what it is. So I'm going to just, I'm not terribly bothered. I'm not terribly bothered for the demo what size this is. It may trip me up later. And you will see. So, just a bit of a champagne, a bit of a comfort. Now, if it's the driving wheel, like the bottom one of that one, it's got a groove in it. That one happens to have grooves in both sides. So we're making like a pulley. So I'm now going to just do a V-groove. That's straightforward turning. We've all done V-grooves somewhere or another. Now, if you go look at the John's and the double one, the flax wheel, you'll find that some of the pulleys have got V-grooves and some of them have got U-shaped grooves. This one I'm going to make a U-shaped groove. I'm going to make a mess of it, but that'll do. Why is there a difference? The V-shaped grooves tend to be on the pulley on the wheel that is the driving pulley. So the V-shape traps your driving cord better than the U-shape would. On the bobbins, they tend to be U-shaped because that on a bobbin is used to create the back tension that allows the bobbin to take up the yarn. And it's actually, on some wheels, it slips. On other wheels, it doesn't. Is that me?
Yeah.
Is it that one? Is that microphone on? So the one I've turned there, it's on the bottom. If I take my finest parting tool, thinnest parting tool, I can get into that gap I made earlier. I can line it up with the edge I'm interested in keeping. And I can drive in. I know there's a 16mm hole in the middle, so it won't go all the way through. Are you any good at catching on the front row? I'll take this out so you can. What was that? I wish I could get slime. So I've got one good side and one bad side. Let me find a battery. Let's change the battery, if that is me. Now I've got a problem. Put that in there. So here's the next interesting bit I brought. The joke here, she's far too busy, which is good. I've been asked to do one of those things to stick your kitchen roll in, you see. I haven't got around to it yet. She needs to find a wood turner. That's the problem. But I realized when I made this, it looked like exactly what she's after. What did I do it for? I used to try making jam chucks, and I never got very far with jam chucks. So instead of jam chucks, I started to make my own little chucks. I think I've shown them here before, but not on a demo. And this is supposed to be a pyramid of sizes. Or something like that. And if you get right down there, if I had made this the right size, that would have fit. So, the next one in the pile is probably the one I want. So, that is almost stuck in there. So, that's the rough face I just on the parting. So, I'm now holding that quite securely. So, my rough face here can be made flat. Without going over the end. If I were really making this properly, which I'm going to have to start cutting short, you get the time. I keep all my sandpaper. It's too clever, isn't it? Sue Harker again. I take no credit for it. But if I were going to do any sanding, I can do the sanding as it's in here. Yeah, I'll do that. I'll do that. I was hoping to do a second one of these better, but you know that bunting that they've nicely hung. The good thing about it is I can't see the clock, so I don't know what time it is. Somebody will shout to you, won't they? Have a look at the biggest. I used offcuts of ply. This happens to be the good birch ply I had lying around somewhere left over. And I tend to use the birch ply because it actually stands up to this tree better. Easy enough to, on a piece of this, you can turn a correct size spigot on the back that fits the chuck you're using all the time, which mainly is this one for these. With it in the chuck on that at the back, you can cut that outer hole there to be the size you want for the thing that's going to go in there. Give or take a bit of a mil or two or whatever you tolerances you work to. Knock a hole out the center because you might want to get something in there. And once you've done that, sew 4 cuts in to give you some flexing. This one's nearly finished with because it's flexing almost too much, but that's all right. I can make another one. They don't cost anything other than the stuff, the wood. Once it's in there, tighten it up. I didn't just now, but I tend to line it up. Both my chucks overhead, both my chucks, if you look, have a scribe mark there. I don't know if you can see that. Can you see that? Yeah, that's marking the gap next to it's between 1 and 4. And I tend to always put these in with my gap that I've cut in there next to that, and then I can tighten it up. So the one that I've just used, if I put it in the right way around, if I put it back in, it's such a good fit, that one. I shouldn't have used that. I end up breaking it. So it means I can hold that. I've turned it around now. It's gone in easier this time. And so I'm now put it in backwards or forwards or whichever way around you want. And I can do the same to what was the front side. I should have done that before whilst it was still on the blank. I think the principle is more important than the finish, so I'm not going to worry too much more about that. If you want to look at my finish, look at those. So I have lots of different sizes. There's one of them marked, no, one of them marked ring keepers, because I used to make a lot of ring keepers, which we sold at the things, and that's how that works. Is that good? This one says it's 66.5 millimeters. Who works to 0.5 of a millimeter? It's 2.5 inches, so it's about the same thing. So that one's 3 inches, 2.5 inches, and they're all different things I've had to get hold of, and I do find myself making them fairly often. But that would be what I'd do to turn that. What I should do now is a second one, but I'm not going to do a second one. You can imagine that I can do a second one, although sometimes the second ones are that shape. So there's my first one, which is nearly the same size. And there's my second one, and that's one. The sizing of this on certain wheels, if you have a wheel that is called a double drive wheel, and the one of John's that's got the flats on it at the end, it's got 2 flyers. These are the flyers. So it's a double flyer, but it's also a double drive. And the double drive is 2 pieces of drive cord. They're not 2 pieces, it's one big loop that's been doubled up like a figure of 8. And one piece of it goes over the drive for all of this, and the second piece goes over this on the actual bobbin. If you've got that type of wheel, this bobbin has to be smaller than the drive bobbins. And the reason for that is you don't have tension in the way that that works or the way that this works. If you release your tension on the thread, it can start to drive the bobbin faster than the flyer. And that's how it winds on. On this type, where the tension is here, it's called the Scotch tension. The tension is created by a sprung-loaded band on the back, so on the back. And on this one, when you released your tension on your thread that you're spinning, the bobbin will break, it'll go slower, and the flyer will go faster, and it'll wind on. So there's 2 different ways that the thread winds on to the bobbins. Is that all right? That's the only time you have to really worry about the size of these. On this type of wheel, it doesn't really matter. You can see they're all about the same sort of size. Why is that one like that? Quite often, they're that shape to fit in to the shape of the actual flyer that goes around them. These don't match, they don't go together. But it means you really don't have any thread to wind on there. So you don't have these little hooks. It's my own theory. This one's fairly square, so the hooks go right to the end, but quite a lot. There are no hooks around this corner. So they put a bigger end on, I think. I don't know. There might be a different reason for it. John might be able to tell me. So that's what the different size ends. If I were being careful, I could just switch this now for the one. That's a finished one. What I wanted to go on and talk about, because I'm not going to make a second one of those. You've seen one. That's all right. Is a bit more about drilling holes, and we can do a bit of this before tea, and then we'll see what happens. Now this is where I'm going to get in a mess, because even if I do that, let everybody see what's happening. That's better. If you just knock it with that locked, that's my adapter to make my chucks fit this lathe, and it comes off there. I nearly told you why I've got 2 the same. My father-in-law used to Woodturning, and he had the same chuck, and I bought the same chuck. And inevitably, with father-in-laws, fathers, mothers, one day you inherit things. So I've got two of those chucks. I only bought one of them. I said I was going to do a number of things that are wrong. Let me just try this side of tea. Put that back in there. Flip that around. What could possibly go wrong? If I want to drill a small hole down the middle of a piece of wood. Right. There's no prizes for anybody that can tell me what I'm doing wrong here. I told you could tell me what I was doing wrong. First of all, it doesn't fit on the lathe. I didn't allow for that. So what am I doing wrong? Anybody? Too much drill sticking out. How fast shall I run it as well? Okay. Can you see the play in that? I didn't know there was all that play in there. Let's wind that in a bit. It's when I put my goggles on you'll realise I'm not joking. Don't publish that. Right, what could possibly go wrong? Have you ever tried this? Yeah, John's tried it. I thought, as I'm the closest to it. Right, well, yeah, it might go. Feels quite nice. What's the problem? Oh, well, nothing but a bit of candle fat wouldn't fix, or something else. I mean, it's the end of the quilt. Okay. 4 minutes, I'll stop being silly. So what's happening? I told you that drills could bend. They're not very solid. This one certainly can. It's hot now. This one certainly can. So what it can do, I have done this successfully at home once. You know, just how you put things down and they disappear. Let me see the chuck key. What's that? Unfortunately, with the noise, I didn't get to the end. But take my word for it. Overhead? Right. That's the starting hole on that piece of wood. It's nearly on the crosses. Yeah? Was that very difficult to move this around? I realise why demonstrators have trouble. That's the other end. Yeah? Using the same drill, that's how far it went off through that. You might not be bothered about that. But this was my first attempt. And the drill actually came out the side. I was standing well back. I did have the goggles on. Because I don't know what that can take. So drilling long holes in bits of wood, you need to think carefully about. At that point, there's nobody come out of the kitchen last. Got the timing wrong. So what I want to do is set up for the spindle of my bobbin. Well, I don't know. I used to have a thing for marking centres. Anybody do it this way? It's a good old woodworking way of doing things. And it's at a time like this you realise there are things you haven't brought. Okay. One beauty thing about this chuck, sorry, you can hold square in it quite nicely. And the jaws go all the way back. They are rounded, but if you put it in corners out, you can hold that there quite nicely like that. Right, nearly done. Because I didn't have my thing for making holes with, there's one. So I'm going to bring that right to the end. I'm going to put that into the hole I've just made. And it's tea break. When I said I was just turning this down, that's exactly what I'm doing to something that I can hold like that. Now, this is my own technique. I don't know how clever it is, but what I said before was this end, I can guarantee if I've got that center in the wood and I cut now myself a spigot on here. Yeah. Spigot that fits this end. The spigot will be concentric with the dint in the middle. It's only a dint at the moment because I've not drilled a hole yet. But without dropping it on the floor. It's much easier at home because I have a shelf that I can put things on. So I can mount that in there quite loosely, but the spigot is concentric with the center. So I've still got a center on here. So I'm going to pick that center up. Tighten that not too much. So the same thing again on this end. I don't think I need to do both ends, but I'm doing both ends. And I can get another spigot on that end. Just for fun. Right, I have to remember the operation here. I'm now going to put that back further into the chuck because everything's sort of centered, but I haven't finished centering yet. This has still got flats on it, by the way. I've not got down to size, but I'm clamping on the round bits, not the flat bits. So those round bits are reasonably centered, but not completely finished. So that's when I now bring this, not that one. I would bring this up. So we're back to which we've already talked about, so you know what these are now. Center drills. If you have a look at a piece of metal, turned metal, you'll almost certainly find there's a little hole in the middle. That's bang on center. If you wanted to return that to clean it up or something, you can use that as the center point. So most things that are turned like that will have a hole somewhere in the center. Even my big drill's got a little in it, center drill. For a center drill, with that turned down, it looks ever so slightly off to me, but I'm not going to worry about that because it's going to make its own hole. So we've now got a hole in there. Yeah. that I can think about drilling the hole I want. For these, the actual hole down the center is about 7 mil. If you can, top, if you can see in there, not enough light. The hole all the way through is 7 mil. The hole that you see at the end is 10 because it takes the little plastic insert. The plastic insert is the bearing that the whole thing runs on. If you make them just out of straight wood, they don't run quite so well. A lot of the old ones are done that way, but if you pay 16, 20 quid or whatever it is from Ashford for one of theirs, you get little grey plastic inserts. I've got black ones. I can do white ones. Louet are 25. The Louet one, this that I made a copy of, what my wife is using at the moment, 25 quid, finished. That's all right. The one from Major Craft started about 40 and go up to 60. Don't get into that. Okay, so what have I done? I've given myself a little hole. Now here's one of the tricks. It says here, this is where it gets expensive, but only because I want a 7 mil hole through. And I have this wonderful set of drills that one day will grow up into real drills. So that's your jobber drill that we all use all the time. This is a stubby. And again, in metalwork, people use stubby drills a lot more than they use these. The whole point being, if you put them in a chuck, you've got a lot less stick out. And when I said originally with the long drill in there, what am I doing wrong? Well, I was using a long drill. It's one of the things I was doing wrong. So if I now start with a stubby drill, slow it down a bit, it will take that speed, but even that looks off to me. You know, there's a bit of play on this, and I can see that in the hole. Can you probably can't pick it up on any of the cameras, but I can move that. Can you hear that? That's catching on the side of the hole I've made. So I'm going to go like that. I did check the alignment before we started. This is in line with that. I put the 2 points together because that could also have been a thing that would throw a hole off. So I can start with my stubby. It was easy to start with because it was going into the hole that the center had made. Make sure you clean it out. That was something I didn't do before because you don't want anything to block that working to its best. I'm nearly at the end of the actual flutes, so I can't get any more out with that drill. But what have I done? I've created a hole that I hope is straight and on center. The center drill made it center. The fact that it's a stubby and is not going to bend very much, hopefully means it's going in straight. So I put that 7 back and then here. So what have I done? I've created a hole that can act as a guide for this drill. This drill can bend more than that drill. So if I now put that in, see, even that is catching just before I go in there. So if this were a metalworking lathe, there'd be some sort of gib strips which you can tighten up and straighten up. I don't know whether you get them on one of these. There may be something underneath. It may be possible to shim something, or it might just need taking off, cleaning and sorting out. So there is an issue there. Sorry, I found that. So that's actually going into a hole that's already there. And eventually it'll start to cut. Now, one of the tricks one of the demonstrators showed us, if you slacken that up, you can pull it out quick. I don't know who did that for us first time. Back in, lock it off, start again. So I'm not pushing it in to drill the hole. I'm only pulling it out to clean that off, because you don't want any of that on your drill whilst you're drilling the hole. Once it gets to the stop, clamp it off, go again. Because as soon as you fill your flutes up, that drill's not going to do anything at all. But now I need some more of that. So I would have had to pull it out, whatever I did, and then push it back in. Lock it off. Drill it out to the end. And if I've got a long enough drill, it'll come out the other end. That wobbly one I used was a brad pointed drill. I don't like them for that. I don't think they center as well. If you've got the start, the center drill start, you've created the cone shape that drill will pick up. It's why there are several different sizes. I didn't bother changing it because the one I use is about right for a 7mm. It's not right for the 16 I did to start with. But the issues aren't as great on a 16, and it's only on the ends, and it's nothing to do with its spinning and its, yes, yeah, concentricity, yeah. So I didn't get through. So my only option is to do it again. And do it all again for this end. Yeah. I knew I needed more. I needed 2 nights, 2 demonstrations to get through all of this. I don't know if you can see that, but that's off. I'm not going to worry about that. I'll show you why in a minute. So there's my hole. Come on. With the center drill. There's my chuck. There's my 7mm stubby. So I'm doing the same at this end. And if I'm lucky, the stubby will pick it up. Right, we're through. Now, lots of people would probably say, don't take it off now because you've got it centered and all the rest of it. But if I take that off and find my 7, the long one, that's in from one end, don't get it stuck. It's tightening up, so the hole isn't quite straight. Put it in from the other end, but that's the end it drills, so that should go in. And it's just, I can just feel it catching. So they're ever so slightly up, but not much. So the 2 ends actually are lined up. Now, I guess I wasn't bothered about everything there. What I now do is we now start to get the thing seriously straight. I finish with the holes, so I finish with that. So now I want that. Yes. I want that, I want that. Those spigots I put on before, and I don't trust them now. I didn't need both of them. So what I'm going to do now, I will tighten that up in a minute. So, fasten that on. Right, I'm now centered, this end. Tighten that up. Now I can now go back up to speed. And you can see that wobbling. Can you? Can the camera? Not that one. Top down. Let it start it again. If you watch it. there's a wobble on it. I can see it from here, but I can redo my spigot. You can hear it's not centered. And once it sounds good, that means that spigot is now centered on the hole. Yeah. This all seems a bit long-winded, doesn't it? I should have timed myself. I can now put that in there, but it's centered on the hole. And I can center this hole, which is the one that's all the way through. So my wood now is centered up beautifully on the holes. There's a secret to this. So I can now turn that conventionally a lot faster, please. Yeah, it's about 22 mils it goes to. I'm not going to measure it, no point. But because I'm centered on the holes, I can turn it around under the other end if I want. And I can end up with a spindle that is concentric to the holes on the outside and centered and everything, and the whole straight through, as near as damn it straight, and not going to bind on the bit that it rides on, which I did have earlier. I put a 7mm hole in. That's a 1/4 inch. Nearly all of these on all the wheels I worked on are 1/4 inch. So that's the actual flyer spindle. This is the thing that's, there's an orifice for the yarn to go through and to come out and then go around the hooks to go onto the bobbin. So if this were the right one, that would fit on there and it would spin quite nicely. It doesn't fit on there because it's too long for this one. One little bit of interest there. When you've got the double drive and you're driving off some, they call it a wall. That may not be the correct pronunciation. This is an old one that came off a wheel. And that usually goes on there with a reverse thread. So that would go on there and you turn it that way to tighten it on. And that's the bit that drives it. It's a reverse thread because that's the way you're turning most of the time you're spinning. You start spinning, most of these, they'll start spinning with the wheel going clockwise, if it's the conventional wheel that we're looking at. And if it's a double drive, then that's probably over there and you're going clockwise. So this is, I don't know, anyway, reverse thread. If that were being used, then that would have to be smaller than the smallest of the ones there so that it worked this difference of speed for taking up the yarn. I'm not going to say any more about that. That's what that is. What I would do next, because you've seen me cut my 16mm on wherever I put it, the thing that I'm not going any further with, I would turn this end to be a 16mm spigot. I'll probably tighten that up. I'll move this over a bit. Anyway, that's how it would be done. I would use my caliper to get to 16mm. Slightly. We all right? What's that now? Is that me again? I would set them to be just slightly bigger than 16, get it down to that size using whatever. I'd probably set it and mark it, yeah, till I got it the right size. And then I have this, which just lies around on the bench. And I'd use it just to try the size. Is it me or the other one? Where was that battery from? The new one. New pack. Okay. Concentric, everything centered, all on the hole. The last thing I would end up doing with that is drilling that out to 10, because that's where the plastic goes. I'm not going to do that now because I want to move this on a little bit. I would turn it till it fit. That was close. Sometimes you can do it without measuring, you know. I'm going to show you a video. It's about 10 minutes. I apologize for that. Can we go to number 4? The reason for this, well, I'm going to do that now. Martin sort of set this up. He didn't know he was setting it up. How many can I make in a day? Right. We're on that, and here we go. No, that's not the one. Well, hold on. The spindle for the bobbins that I'm making, if I'm making more than one, I will make them on my metal lathe. The metal lathe differs mainly from the wood lathe by having a carriage that you wind and a cross slide that you wind a cross slide, and your tool is here. That's the main difference. On this lathe, I've also fitted this, which is a digital readout that tells me exactly where the cutter is. If I'm moving it in and out, the x-axis is changing, and if I move it from side to side, the z-axis is changing. It gives the measurements on magnetic slides that are fixed to the machine. The readout can work in both radius measurements on here or diameter. For turning something like this, where I'm aiming for the diameter, I have it switched to diameter. Absolute is a setting where you start, and after you've used the absolute, you switch to incremental, which is there. On incremental, you can have any number of positions memorized in here. So we'll change the camera position so that you can see everything that's going on, and we'll get on with this. Here we are at the lathe. This is my already prepared with a hole straight through piece. Did this on the actual wood lathe. This goes in. I've turned just a very slight spigot on each end, but it was centered on the holes at each end, looking for the concentricity. So I put that in the jaws very lightly, bring up the tailstock. So I'm interested in this end, tailstock end, because that is centered. Just tighten that up enough to drive it. And now I can bring my cutter into the end here. Yep. And start the lathe. And I'll speed up to just under 1000 RPM. And set the tool fitting only a mill or so RPM. Then cut across the full length of the spindle. If you do a straight cut, wavering as there might be by doing on the video. This seems slower than doing on a wood lathe, but You only do it once. And you get everything. Now, what I'm interested in now is what actual size that is, because that's now cut, and it's cut to the center of the tailstock. So if I take a dimension on that now, 22.99. I'm going to leave it at that because I'm quite happy at 23. So the problem I've got is if I take it out, it's not a problem. I just need to clean that up. But now I can do this because I'm going to come up here and I'm going to zero both of the counters. So that's telling me where that cutter was when I cut that piece. If I tighten that up there, tighten that up there. Run it again. I'm now going to put this across from a zero, which will clean up the end. And the joint should be spot on with your output and thing on the other end. Now, same again. What size is this? 22.98. Now, this is where it gets interesting. If we go up to the DRO on what is the Z feed, sorry, if we go up to the DRO on what is the X feed, which I'm now saying is zero, but I've just measured my diameter at 22.98. If I tell this to enter 22.98, it's now telling me that X is at 22.98. If I wound my X out, so the cutter's coming away, that's where my cutter is, but I know my diameter is 22.98. But on this end, if I line my cutter up with the very, very end on the Z and start, zero the Z, cutting 10 millimeters using the DRO readout. Then we cut deeper. And I could actually take deeper cuts in this, but I'm just taking it single. To the 10 mil point every time. That's now 18. The next is 17.3 off the readout. And then 16.9. And now we finish on the last bit at 16. And we're there now, and we pull out the tube. If I now take my column, measure 15.98. Of course, in woodworking, this is all nonsense, working to a few microns. That's not really what I'm doing. I want that to be 16. If I now take that away, wind this out of the way, and bring up the end that I'm going to put in there, and offer that up, without any effort at all, I've made my first 16 mil hole fit a 16 spigot. If I take that off, I'll clean that up in a minute. That's now a spigot that's going to be glued, so I can use that. Bring up my centre. Make sure it's tight. Now we can go again, but I'm using the same measurements. So we go to the other end, we set it to 0, and we start cutting in 10 mil. That's 18 mil cut on the diameter. I can take bigger cuts than that. This is down to 16.3. So there's a couple of mils come off there. And then my final cut will be 16. And we pull out. And that's taking less than 30 seconds. So I've now turned the second end without making any measurements, because all the measurements are in the digital readout. I now undo that. Move that out of the way. After my 16 mil hole up, it fits beautifully. So I can now turn any number of these without changing, making any more measurements, because it's all in the memory of the digital readout. So I've now got 2 spigots. If I had 2 ends, they'd fit. I need to do a little bit of cleaning up with some sandpaper, and that's finished. If I were now making 3, which I might be, I can put the next ones in and do them very quickly. It is quicker once you've got it set up. So, I played that back when I was editing it, and there are no cuts in that. It is actually real time. And I was awfully pleased when the end went on as easy as it did, and as nicely as it did. Because usually, I'll take a bit more off it. I trusted the numbers on the actual digital readout, and it worked. And perhaps I've just got used to the size because that went on tonight as well. So that's making the spindle for the bobbin. The last bit, which I do, is using a plastic, and it makes this little insert for the end. And that's the only bit, well, 2 of them, that ride actually on the metal. And this is a plastic that is used, it's food safe and all sorts of clever things, but it's actually a low friction plastic. Delron is the name it's sold by under, and I think it's acetal. Yeah, acetal. It's easy to turn. The worst thing about it is you get stringy bits everywhere. Again, more to do with the principles than actually getting it turned. This I wouldn't worry about the hole down the middle too much. This has got one. The only thing is, magic number, 6.5 mil. I said a moment ago that every one of these I've worked on is a 1/4 inch. The ones I've made, I made this one, but it's a write-off because there's something not right about it. The hole is not in center, so I didn't actually sell that. Made on the metal lathe. It's made in 2 parts. So this part screws into that part, so there's threads and all sorts of things there. And I always put some grooves on that bit because it's going to be glued when the wood goes on. All right, slight diversion. I was going to talk about this. When I actually make this part, the flyer, this is made out of a solid piece. But most of the ones I've repaired, they've always broken somewhere here. This is what I got off one of them. So it had broken there. And they all tend to be made out of one piece. But if you do that, you've got grain working in different directions at different parts. So you're going to have weak parts in it. So what I've started to do, I don't know if you can see that from there, over the top, I make them. What the problem is, there's a delay. So each time you move it, and look, it's gone the other way. You could set up a game for that. So there's a join there. You can see the join, the different one. So I've got grain running this way along the back, and I've got grain running that way. And they're actually mortise and tenon. They're just halving joints or whatever you call them. There is a piece goes into the wood anyway. It's not enough to be cutting the spindles on the metal lathe. I actually cut these bits of wood on my mill because it's much easier and safer than trying to set it up with a router, because you just go it's done. So this joint has been made using the mill, and it makes the thing much stronger. Why did I say all of that? Yes, 1/4 inch imperial. I make them out of stainless steel, which is notorious for being difficult to work, but some of them are not too bad. Depends which type you get. And the magic number is the hole that's going to go into my piece of plastic when I remember where I put it, is 6.5 mil. Now, anybody know what the conversion is between imperial and metric for 1/4 inch? 6.35. Yeah, I'll go with that. That's all right. I have to divide 25.4 by 4 to get to that. But so that means 6.5 actually is a pretty good, quite close clearance for 1/4 inch. I mean, if I put those side by side, you can hardly see the difference. But it does mean if I've drilled a 6.5 in one of these, that's going to go in there and ride quite nicely without hardly any play on it. I could get it closer than that, but then you risk them being ever so slightly out of alignment before you get there. So just quickly, I put it in. Yes, if I remember what I'm doing, it'd be quickly, wouldn't it? That's the 7. That's 6.5. Bring that up. Make sure that's tight again. All right. The plastic's like that when you buy it. 1-foot lengths, which are too long to go in your lathe. You have to cut it before you, which means you're going to waste a little bit when you get to the end. But there you go. So that's ridden in there quite nicely. So this must be left over from doing this some of the time. But now we're cutting. No, we're not, because I filled up the flute. I did say you've got to keep cleaning stuff out. So that's not quite all the way through, but that's okay. I wouldn't bother. I wouldn't bother centering things. I would tell myself it's got a bit of a flange on it. Oh, that's nice. Why something else? Well, there it is. Try that one. Okay. I wouldn't bother doing that, but now I will bother doing that. Well, it's not quite as bad, is it? So I can turn that down to there. I want that to be, if I've made the hole, I want it to be 10 mil. So I would do just the same. It's only like a big spigot. You can use, for a lot of these big spigotty things, it's a beading and parting tool. It's a big skew, fat skew. So you can cut this stuff with this and it just peels off. And then you get in a terrible mess. Yeah. So I'd actually cut most of that. I'd probably make it on the metal lathe. I can do it with a skew until I get somewhere close. The skew cuts it quite nicely like that. It's sort of, yeah. So you've got to find which one does it the best. And I'm probably far too small there. No, I've got to go down to 10. Can't go down to 10 without measuring that one, can I? I have no idea how to do that without measuring it properly. And that's strange. It's a set at 10. It's a caliper that knows what it's doing. So that's my size. That's the rest of it. That's the corner you need to get clean, otherwise it won't seat. Then you can bring the big one out. It's interesting that it only squeaked when I started, and now it's not. And of course, I can't see what I'm doing. So that's probably gone too far. Because I'm going to stick it with probably arrowdite, I'll put some little grooves in, the point tool, and then I would part it off. Not forgetting there's a hole down the middle of about 7 mil. And there it goes. Wouldn't it be nice now if that fit in there? Oh, that's handy. It does. It's not supposed to. See, you're supposed to be telling me things I'm doing wrong. And I would just clean the end up with an ordinary buff gouge. And if it's holding on to it, it will just come square. Yeah. If I'm feeling really, if it works, doesn't always work. Look at that. How's that for a countersink? So there we are. But of course, I didn't finish that spindle, so I didn't have a hole to put it down. But if I take this one off here, it's never going to be that lucky. Oh, right. I'll put that one back on there. So that's the one that I just turned. So that's how I make those. I'd probably make that slightly thinner. It doesn't need to be quite that thick, that flange that's on there. But then I usually use iodite. So it doesn't need much, and that doesn't need much in there. So now the whole thing is quite solid. I mean, we've got some quite thin bits of wood in there, but for what it's doing, it's more than solid. It's strong enough. So that's how that's done. Just very quickly, because it's now nearly time for home, before Steve starts shouting at me. When I make these, on my lathe at home, that goes in there. And I would somehow fasten that on because it's not tight enough. But I get the rough shape of this actually on the lathe. And I can actually, I don't know, with a parting tool or something, have that spinning. But I only use it to give me the sizing. But it's to be accurate sizing, again, centered, concentric. And you can actually get down the inside to give yourself sizing. Size, yes. And having marked it on the lathe using this, I can then sand most of that out. I wouldn't want to turn that on the lathe. Although there might be a technique of fastening something on this end and doing something with it, but it's really hit and miss too much. But it would go on the lathe. And then finally, pictures. This this wheel was turned. My main lathe is a CL1. It's quite old now, but it still does sterling work. The head turns, and when the head's turned, I've also got the outrigger for the tool rest. So the wheel was actually turned on that lathe. To get to that stage, it started out with the markings out on a piece of paper to get all the sizes, dimensions for all the bits. Then the bits were done, put together. The outer of the wheel, the main part of the wheel, on a board marked up and then glued and jointed somehow. I can't remember how I jointed it, but I did. And then there was a hub, the actual wheel hub. And if you look at the wheel hub, you should be able to see that the grain stops and starts again. It's a split hub. That will be put back together with a paper joint. And then the hub is turned. With the holes already in it, because they were drilled in on the flats or whatever it was, it still had flats on it. And you can just see that the grain changes. So it's in two parts, because you have to split the hub. To put the whole thing together. But to turn the wheel, I used the backboard and mounted it on a board, but I was turning it with the hub in the center on the center shaft, the metal that's studding, but it's the center shaft. So again, the whole thing stays almost concentric. Okay. And it looks like that on the lathe when it's spinning. Now, there's a bit of movement on that because this is not when I turned it. This is only a week or two ago when I did the video of it. And that wheel has probably changed shape a little bit. Wood never stays solid. That's me, isn't it? Yes. So there's always movement in wood, depending on the humidity and all of that sort of stuff. But that's how the wheel was turned. That's how that was turned, well, used to get it going. Spokes are obvious, turning between centres. Legs were turned between centres. I didn't bring the drills. I was going to talk about how you get legs in skew. Axminster do a set of, they're like Forstner bits, but made by Fish or somebody. And they actually are Forstner bit style, but they come with a centre pin or a drill in the centre of the actual Forstner bit. So you can start a hole that's not straight with just a 1/8 drill or whatever it happens to be, and that guides you in with the cutter. So you can do an angle cut with a force and a bit very, very easily. Try doing it with a force and a bit. Freehand, you're asking for trouble. So that's how they were done. Anything else on there? No. Metalwork, yeah, things. And then more of this plastic stuff at the top of this one. This is a bit heavy. If I did it again, I'd do it lighter weight. And I think that's it. Because I like them so much, I had a slideshow of my favorite video, sorry. My favorite. And Silco Dewhurst were in Skipton. And in Skipton, they really like their bobbin because it came out for May Day or whenever it was. So in trying to work out what I was going to do tonight, I found that. I'll finish on that. Sorry, I've not actually made anything and put it together. There you go. Thank you very much.